We are back on Morning Line. Thanks for joining us. Our guest is attorney David Raybin. He knows the Tennessee Constitution. He's been following the issues you see on the screen. We're talking about mask mandates. I mentioned earlier that at least here in Metro Legal is going to be meeting with school board members later today to discuss what options they may have. Of course, there's a mandate for masks here in Metro schools, which is underway right now. But the governor has that executive order. What kind of advice do you think Metro Legal is going to give school boards, and maybe not just Metro, but school boards around the state that have mandates are asking the same question?
Well, I've served in the state attorney general's office. I've been an assistant district attorney. I've advised administrative agencies in situations kind of like this before. And basically what happens is the board asks their attorney, which is Metro Legal, what are our options? What can we do? I suggest that the school board is very much wanting to continue to mask mandate for all the students. Is that going to be legal? The Metro Legal probably will say, look, you've got this opinion of the Attorney General saying that you cannot act at cross purposes with the governor's law. But I would advise the school board that the governor's action may not be a law, may not have the force of law, because it's saying that the school board, you can't do something, and the school board's action is really may not be considered a law that the governor can suspend. And that's what I would argue if I was advising the school board. I'd say the governor's mandate that the school board's health-related action is not something that the governor has the power under this statute to say, school board, you cannot do it.
Because it's not a law, really? How would you describe what the school board's doing with the mandate? Is it policy? Is it a...
Well, I think that the school board has the authority to regulate their schools within certain parameters. State law does govern how schools are run. But remember, Nick, that where does the school's authority come from? It comes from the Constitution. The Constitution guarantees every child in Tennessee a free public education. It's part of our Constitution. So children could advocate and say, look, this action of the governor is interfering with my right as a student to have this free public education. I want to go to school. I don't want the governor to put me potentially in danger of my health. So you could have children or their parents filing lawsuits on behalf of their children. But the question is whether the governor's action is something that is suspending a law as opposed to a policy. And I would argue that the school board's procedure on the mask mandate may not be a law that the governor has the right to suspend the way the statute is written.
Interesting. And I'm just wondering, that kind of dovetails into what we saw happening at one district in Texas. Because I think we would say that a dress code for any school is a policy, and it's in the handbook. And could Metro, and I don't know how it would happen, but could they put masks in as part of a dress code, an amended dress code, just for now, the way this school district has done now in Texas to try to get away around the governor's executive order there?
I think that's interesting. I don't think Metro would be that disingenuous to do it that way. I think they would just simply come out and say, look, the mask mandate for schools is a health-related issue. It's related to our children, and we're simply going to enforce that to protect the children and the teachers. And it's not a law, it's a health thing, and if the child doesn't comply with it, then the child could be sent home. But that's going to put it in direct conflict with the governor's mandate. And that's where you may end up seeing the state attorney general filing the lawsuit. Because once Metro Legal gets the advice from their lawyer, they're going to issue some kind of decision that we're going to continue to have the mask mandate, which they may very well do, because there's a lot of support for that, and throw it into the court and let the court decide, which then puts it into the Chancery Court. So then you have the four different branches of government fighting with each other. You have the governor, you have the legislature, now the courts, and then the local entities. And of course, it's all dealing with our children, which is unfortunate.
I'm curious, if it does go to courts, I mean, while that's being decided, is there an injunction blocking the executive order, or does the executive order take effect and it'll stay that way until the courts rule?
That's a great question, because that gets into a whole nother body of law regarding temporary injunctions. A stay And the only way you can get a stay is to show irreparable harm. And the school board would say, look, if you don't allow us to enforce this, children could get sick and potentially die. There's your irreparable harm. What a chancellor might do is say, look, I'm going to keep the status quo for right now, but the school can keep their mask mandates, and we'll set a very quick hearing on this. That is the remedy for it. If the court issues an injunction or a stay, which a court might very well do because of the harm, potential harm to children, then the courts are required to sit there and say, we're not going to leave the stay in there for weeks or months. We're going to have a hearing within 15 or 20 days.
So it could be quick.
It'll be very quick to decide, because a stay could functionally decide the lawsuit. And in fact, that's what happened. You asked a great question. That's what happened in the United States Supreme Court, where California issued an order saying you can't have religious services in a home with more than three groups of people. But you could have a business that have more people in it. And the Supreme Court said, oh, wait a minute. You're restricting a religious exercise by saying it has to be under 10 people, but you could have a store open and have 20 or 30 people. That violates the Constitution. But it was in the context of an injunction that issue arose. So it went to the Supreme Court within days of the California court's ruling. So that is really, really, really a great question, and you could see this resolved by within a few weeks.
That's fast, because sometimes those injunctions can drag on, but not in this case. Not in this case. Let's take a call from Linda. Linda, good morning. Hi, Linda.
Good morning, guys. We all know that the children are to have a free public education. And if I'm not mistaken, did I not hear at the beginning of the school year that that the governor had said there would be no virtual school? So if parents, if they say that half the class or half the school is not going to wear a mask, and some parents decide they want their child at home because some of them already have had RSV and a few have already had COVID positive test results, then how can they give a child free public education if they don't allow virtual school? And I thought that I heard that it was the governor or somebody up above the board that there would be no virtual school this year. So what would that entail? Thank you.
Yeah, she's really good point. And you're right. Virtual schools off the table right now. It's not an option. And so would they just argue then that, well, that's a parent that's making a choice not to put their child in school, and that's their choice? I guess they're going to miss out. Is that what that's going to be?
No, that's not fair to the child or the parent. And the caller asks a great question, and you set this thing up correctly. Because what's happening now is you're limiting the number of options that a school board could exercise. Theoretically, they could say, well, in lieu of a mask mandate, we'll just go back to virtual schools, which nobody wants. So I think we're down to the situation where they're just simply going to say, we're going to enforce our mask mandate in Davidson County, probably in Shelby County, and let's see what the governor does about this. This business of suspending teacher salaries and all that stuff, that's not going to happen. Nobody's going to be that foolish. But I think what's going to happen is the way for the governor to enforce this is to direct the Attorney General to file a court action in Chancery Court enforcing his order. That's the appropriate way to do it, and that would get into it, and then you would have some teeth in it, because ultimately it's courts that enforce these orders and enforce statutes. Nobody's going to go down and arrest the school board.
Right. Now, and on the other side of the coin, she gave the example of a parent that says, I'm worried about my child, I'm going to keep them home, but I can't do something virtually. But now what's going to happen if the school board sticks to its guns and continues with this mandate, and a parent who is not someone who supports masks comes to school, and I think I already saw one case of this, and the child shows up, walks in without a mask, and they deny him entry because he doesn't have a mask, and says, no, you don't have a mask, you can't come in. The parent's like, wait a second, I have this executive order here. Now, I guess the parent's action there would be to, maybe file the lawsuit and challenge it, but in the meantime, that little boy or girl is missing class because the parent says, I don't want my son wearing a mask in class, and they're not letting him in. They're going to turn him away at the door.
That is why a court is going to act very quickly, because while many people are in favor of the mask mandate, because of the health and safety consequences of it, there are a lot of people, particularly like in Williamson County, we saw people just going on. It was like the Jerry Springer show down there where people were screaming and yelling.
That was ugly. That was just awful. That was
I
awful.
mean, arguing about
that kind of
sort of
behavior is
thing.
absurd.
Well, I mean, you're supposed to debate these things in a rational way.
Exactly.
But you know, when it comes to children, people sometimes. Well, we saw the same things when the schools were integrated. You know, people were saying, well, we can't have this and all this kind of carrying on. But at the end of the day, a rational way to deal with this is you have people who legitimately feel that masks are inappropriate for their child for whatever reason. Either they don't believe that this COVID exists or whatever, or they have religious scruples about it, and they simply say, we're not going to mask our child no matter what the school board says. You can't turn my child away. That is where this thing is going to happen, and you'll probably see what's known as an intervener lawsuit, where you have a lawsuit that's going on and some other entity tries to intervene, where functionally the same issues are at play. So you may see a group of parents join together and ask the court to participate in this mask lawsuit, saying my child has been turned away by the school board. My child cannot have a free public education, as the Constitution requires, because the school board's acting in direct violation of the governor's edict. And that will really set that up. And then you have the players all at the table, as it were. And you'll probably see that on behalf of some parents joining together. Lawyers would go into that, create civil rights lawsuits, class actions, and the like. But that is the way this thing is very quickly going to happen, because you're exactly right. Many people believe mask mandates are appropriate for young children. Some people feel strongly that they're not. The governor has issued this order, and that's what courts are for, to resolve these things. But at the end of the day, the courts have contempt powers, and the court can either say this is beyond the governor's power to do, or the governor had the authority to do it, and school board, if you don't enforce it, you're in contempt.
All right, take a break on that note. When we come back, more phone calls. Michelle and others, if you're on hold, the line's open, 737-7587. More of our conversation on what is a truly fascinating topic. I mean, something like this. Just haven't seen it in this way ever before. With David Raybin right after this. Stay with us.
This is a Storm 5 weather update. For weather